welcome back to today's Love Transformation class. And I'm super excited to be talking about relationships today, specifically conscious relationships, something we all want, and most of us are not prepared to settle for anything less than that beautiful divine soulmate partnership. And my guest today, a very special friend, is going to be talking to us all about conscious partnerships, how to create this conscious relationship, what they mean, and really giving us some beautiful insights and some wisdom into being able to co-create this partnership that we all desire. Welcome, Elise.
Hi, gorgeous Peter. Thank you so much for having me, and welcome everyone who's joining us here today. It's a true delight, as always, to connect with you and to share with everyone who's with us.
I obviously know you really well, but for any of the girls that are joining us this year that haven't met you before, give us a bit of a snapshot of you and what brought you to this beautiful work about divine partnerships.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say I've been hungry for conscious connection my entire life. I'd say maybe even lifetimes before. So this has been a long time coming in that sense, but I am the woman behind Stella Muse, and I combine kind of like a Western psychological approach to working with women, men, and couples, and combining that with Eastern wisdom, which is Tantra and Buddhism and yoga and the esoteric. So it's kind of a beautiful blend of the modern and the ancient, or East and West, if you want to look at it like that. So we cover all bases, working from a physical, thus sexual perspective, as well as an emotional, a mental, and then consciousness, like we've talked about, is key. So that's kind of my focus. And I do work with women and men and couples around the world. And it really is my joy, because I see it that when we do our work, especially, let's say, in regards to couples right now, when we do that work, it not only affects us as individuals and us in the union, it can affect our children, it can affect our life, it can affect the way we show up at work, what we do, how we create, how we serve, everything. It's got an incredible ripple effect. So starting within us and doing that work in a sacred union and in any kind of partnership is so remarkable. That's why I'm kind of a little bit excited about sharing a bit more about this today.
What I love about our friendship, as well as you being such a beautiful soul, is that you're one of the very few examples of a conscious relationship, you and your partner, Nick, that I actually have. And I know many women actually complain that they don't necessarily have examples or models of this type of conscious partnership that they want, and how to actually get that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of tricky, because even when we're little, we look up to our parents or our guardians or someone to give us an example, or we want a mentor or a teacher or a guide. And that's another thing that I think is really important in the work that I do, and just like the work that you do. Sometimes we need that. But you're 100% right in the sense that we can't just open a magazine or look online, or sometimes even turn to someone in our community or tribe or family and go, that's how it needs to be done. So it does leave that bit of a gap, I suppose. And just to kind of peel it back, I want to say it's not always easy. Some unions can be easier than others. And I guess I explain this like we're multifaceted creatures, beings, however you want to term it. We've got these components that make up our personality nature. I guess we can call it that. In orthodox psychology, we call it the ego. In esoteric psychology that I practice, we call it your personality nature, where you've kind of got this part of you that's your physical component, this part of you that's your emotional component, and this part of you that's your mental component. All that together becomes your personality. But then beyond that, we've got your conscious component too. And here's the thing, you've got these components, your beloved or future beloved has these components, and sometimes they kind of click and they mesh perfectly because they're the same. Sometimes they complement each other, like salt and pepper. I think like this, not the band, if you're old enough to remember that, but kind of going hand in hand. And sometimes they oppose. So that's when you can come across conflict that really just opens up opportunity. So you might have, as an example, this amazing sexual connection with someone, but maybe the mind or the intellectual component or that wisdom aspect is missing. That can be worked on, but it can make it trickier. Or maybe someone you have a super emotional connection with, like you feel each other, you get each other, you feel like something's there, but maybe that physical aspect isn't. And you're kind of like, should this be a friendship? Should this just be a business relationship? So there's all these different factors when you even initially connect with someone, which is going to kind of be a blueprint of parts that are going to be easy, parts that are going to just almost be like love at first sight, kind of that, if we can even refer to it like that anymore. And others that are going to be like, whoa, this isn't so easy, but this part of it's amazing. What do we do? I wanted to preface that because not everything is perfect. And I have been in a long-term relationship, for just under a decade. And it takes work. It takes daily work. We even had a little chat this morning about stuff because, as you mentioned, we've got a little one on the way in 5.5 weeks. And that means our life is going to turn upside down in all different ways. And I'm like, I want to make the most of this before that happens, and because he's such a driven, highly successful person in business, all for serving humanity, mind you, he can get caught up in that. And I'm like, can we reel it back in and just have a moment this morning, just to pause? So I had to bring that to the table. Yes, it was the woman who initiated it, because we often as women can see things, not always, but usually can see things sometimes before the men do. But if we can approach that conversation or that moment from a place of loving kindness, not from aggression, not from lack, but more so, hey, this is what I've noticed, or this is what I'm feeling, or did you see this too? Some kind of door we need to find to connect to that person, open the conversation and put it out there. And then it's a really great habit, I suppose, to learn how to invite. And women can do an invitation like, can we please talk about this tonight? Does that work with you? When does this work? So we've got to be flexible as well. So there's these kind of little things that we can explore and bring to the table to then have that conversation, to then bring more consciousness into the union. We might be conscious, they might not. Sometimes it's the other way around. Sometimes we're both oblivious and we kind of get into this repeat pattern and we go off track. Things get toxic even. It can go to arguments, disconnection, maybe no sex for a long time, or denying love, or there's so many different things that can come up if both of us aren't conscious. But if at least one of us is, then we're already partway there. So we kind of need to call each other out a little bit. And that's part of a conscious relationship. So I get that. We're not perfect. Even nearly a decade in, we still bring things up to work through because it's a work of art. Just like our life is as an individual, so is our union. So yeah, that's just a little bit about having some awareness about doing the work in a sense, and knowing that you're doing this work because you're investing in something that essentially is priceless. And no relationship is perfect 24/7. It doesn't exist because in this human form, we're not perfect. Our physical bodies, our emotions that often take over, the chitter in our mind, that as I talked about, combined as our kind of our personality, or as other psychology says, the ego, isn't perfected. Our conscious self or our soul or our higher self, that's perfected. And the more conscious, the more awake, the more aware we can be, the more that part of us is going to come in to our life and into our relationship, and therefore give us a more divine, connected, conscious, intimate, loving, transcendent connection with the beloved that we all long for.
Let's step out for everyone and break down what you see are the key differences in theory and in practice between a regular partnership, perhaps something that our parents, grandparents, or predecessors might have had, and this new type of conscious partnership that we are mostly deeply desiring, right?
Absolutely. And it's interesting because things have shifted with the times as such, but humans in this human experience form are still slow to pick up on it, So what I can say here might be something that you're experiencing right now, even though you want that conscious connection. That's okay. We're on a journey, right? But if we take kind of a status quo or whatever you want to call it, just a humdrum relationship sometimes when it's fine, it's good, it's comfy, it's nice, but it's not quite enough in this in this area or this part of it, or something's missing. Often it's because somewhere along the line, you're not being seen and heard or loved and cherished the way you long to. And that can appear in different guises. So sometimes if we take the nice relationship, you can get along, you can live together, you might even travel well together, but perhaps your ship's in the night. Perhaps you might share a meal, but you might be on your phone, or there might not be much conversation or actual check-in, or perhaps it's surface level conversation, just chit chat about, the day, or this problem, or don't forget we've got to go, to this store on the weekend, or prepare this, or it's actually not creating intimacy and connection. That can be lacking. And people may or may not be aware of what is missing specifically, but they'll know it's not that. I call it like je ne sais quoi, we say in French. It's like that intangible little quality that's not there. And one of you might be aware of it, both of you might be aware of it, or sometimes it takes a while for one or both of you to be aware of it. And that's okay. It doesn't mean we can't work on it, but someone needs to address it. Someone needs to bring that forward. And that's when we can have the bridge, the transition to a more conscious relationship. So that's just, one example. As I said, perhaps it's a little bit surface level, a little bit mundane, or in the motion, kind of like Netflix and chill and repeat, after work and on the weekends, a few errands, and then we do the same thing again. We're not bringing anything actually, I guess, sacred into it. And sacredness doesn't have to be about sexuality. Sacredness and intimacy can also, yes, be physical intimacy, but we as beings having this experience, especially as women, crave emotional intimacy. We crave intellectual intimacy. And as we have addressed, we crave something more than that too. We want the whole immersion. Yeah. So how that looks, number one, if we just strip it right back, is creating some time and space. Often in this world with so many things to be done and so many things we want to do, and as doers, even though we need to be, sometimes we forget that, we get swept up. We therefore make our schedules so full that we actually don't have a moment sometimes even for ourselves, let alone for our beloved and our relationship. And this is why, if you can see, I wear this kind of Russian wedding ring, not as a wedding ring, just as a ring to kind of symbolize this trilogy. There's you, there's your beloved, and the other part of that triangle is your union, that divine connection, the relationship, whatever you want to call it. The three of them need to be nourished. It can't all just be about one person. It kind of reminds me a little bit of, let's say Sex and the City in the movie where Samantha gave everything to Smith. If you know this, she poured everything into her relationship and she realized, I say his name X amount of times more than I say my own every day. She worked for him. She had a relationship with him. A lot of women sometimes do work, for their beloved, which can be amazing. I help my partner out with his business sometimes too. But if that is all consuming, that's all about one person, it can also be all about the woman. There's no balance there. And it's like a chair with one leg or a stool with one leg. So we have to make time for ourselves, individuals, to feel more fulfilled, whether that's going to a Pilates class, whether that's making sure you eat well, whether it's making sure you get good sleep, whether it's having a little space in the home where you get to read in your little nook, or light a candle, or have a bath, or catch up with a friend, or, certain things that nourish and nurture you as individuals. And then we need time for the union. And yes, that may look like making love. And if it's such crazy schedules, that may mean that we set it in our calendar, our diary, or whatever, that Wednesday night at 7:00, it's us. Phones are away, nothing's on, we've had an early dinner, and whatever happens, happens, whether it's in the bedroom or on the dining table or in the backyard, we're going to get naked and be together or have a shower together or bath or whatever. If it has to be scheduled, there's nothing wrong with that. Then other things can be spontaneous. But you need to create time. It could be going to see a foreign film. It could be listening to an audiobook together. It could be cooking dinner together. Anything that kind of opens up an opportunity for you to connect without external distraction, without anything that's going to drag you away from each other. Because the key here, really, of creating this intimacy, the reason why we want this time and space to create the intimacy is because we need presence. If we don't have presence, if you and your beloved are not present together, it's kind of like someone could be there physically, but emotionally or mentally or energetically, consciously, they might as well be somewhere else. And you know what? We're intuitive. We're perceptive enough to know when someone is here with you and when they're not. And that makes us feel a lack in the bond, a lack in the connection, and hence that cycle of kind of a disconnect of not feeling seen and heard and loved and cherished. So we create time and space to give ourselves the opportunity to foster intimacy so that we strengthen understanding the key importance of presence. And the more presence we have, the more intimacy we can create, the more that can expand into different facets, sexual, emotional, intellectual, conscious in different ways. And sometimes it can be numerous parts of that all at the same time. The more nourished we're going to feel, the more safe and stable we're going to feel in our union. And that, to me, is one of the most important parts of actually having a conscious relationship. It's that presence.
That's a really beautiful distinction, because I often think of, and many women often think of, a conscious partnership as being the one where you're both really challenging each other. You're both involved in your own self-growth and challenging each other, to really evolve as humans and in the partnership. What are your thoughts about that? And also, is it important that we actually meet someone and know right away that they share that same philosophy of wanting a conscious partnership? Or is it possible to meet someone and then be able to embark on this journey together, or perhaps encourage them to also want to desire conscious partnership? How do you feel about that?
Just starting with the second part, I don't believe there's one way. I believe there's, like, we're multifaceted, relationships are multifaceted. So you could meet someone and straight off the bat, there's just this connection because perhaps you met at a certain place, maybe it was at a talk that was about an author's new book, and you both love that author, and you just see that parallel. Other times it can be nurtured. You can be quite different, but because one of you is, so engrossed in this way of life, a conscious way of life, let's say, even a sustainable, ecological, organic way of life, and the other, it's new to them, but they love it. And you've brought this into their world, and now you create that world together and go deeper together, deeper than either of you have gone before. So I don't believe you need to see it straight away. And of course, there has to be something straight away, that little spark, something that's going to bring you together. But as for like knowing, 100% we're on the same path with this, this, and this, doesn't always work that way. I can honestly say I haven't always had that in my previous relationships. I'm kind of a serial monogamous, so there have been other long-term relationships, and things have, changed and evolved and grown and run their course, but that wasn't always there initially. And even now with my partner, we are very different, but we both have a fundamental desire to help humanity awaken, bring more consciousness into their life. We just do it in different ways. So yes, that baseline is there, or that same spark is there, but the way we execute it, the way we share, the way we serve the world is different, because we have different skill sets, we have different personalities, we have different desires of how we can see that being born into the world. So it depends what you want, what you're willing to work with, and what you're open to, because sometimes what we think we want and what we need are two different things. And when we can let go of the grip of this ideal and open up to the opportunity of what may be, we can give ourselves a truly beautiful gift. The key really is that evolution. So you have to both want to evolve and grow together. That's, I think, really important. And that's what's really key, especially at the challenging times, that I've got your back in this. And not just the everyday things, they're really important, but the big things too, life challenges, someone gets sick, or a beloved, family member passes, or a baby's on the way, or whatever, to really support each other through these challenges, because at those times, you may not be as conscious as you usually are. You might be really taken over by emotion, or it might be, perhaps to do with work, and you become quite mental and you're quite detached emotionally, and therefore you realize you're not being as affectionate as you normally are. We have to be understanding, compassionate, kind with ourselves as much as we are with our beloved, and know that at certain times, like I said before, there might be some disconnects. Other times it's just easy and connected. And that is part of the journey of a relationship. We are here to evolve and grow as individuals, having this human experience. And ideally, if you're in a partnership, you're in that to evolve and grow. And that's one thing my partner and I have always said, is that we want to be together for as long as we are evolving as souls, contributing and making a difference. And yes, doing that in our own way, but still doing it together.
In terms of your work that you do specifically with couples, are there any telltale signs you think, or anything that the audience can take as far as noticing when a relationship is not worth fighting for. So talking about the men then specifically, are there any telltale signs in men that you might pick up where you might think to yourself, this woman's actually better off not fighting for this relationship anymore?
Really good question. Once again, always very important that you make these decisions yourself. Very, very important. And I never, as a practitioner facilitating women's one-on-ones or men's or couples, ever say, I think you should break up. You know, one of the things I do bring to the table, however, is what happens if. So kind of like whether it's a visualization or a role play you do within yourself or a meditation or time out, to sit with, if things don't change, and let's just say, for example, something's missing, perhaps there's a disconnect, perhaps it's not intimate enough, it's not conscious enough. If things don't change, how will that look? How will you feel? How will you be thinking? What will that be like in 6 months or 12 months or 5 years? You know, and really immerse yourself. I want them to have a visceral experience of that to see if they're okay with it. And then the flip side of that is, well, what if it does change? What does that look like and feel like? And how will that be in 6 months and 12 months, you know, and 5 years? So it's kind of the stay or the go in a sense. And then sometimes there's another option that it depends on the complication of the current relationship. You know, if they stay and things don't change, if they stay and they do change, or if they choose to just go, enough's enough, I'm going to leave now. In that moment, how does that make them feel? The concept of breaking up a relationship, whether that's been a 6 weeks, a 6 month, a 6 year, a 15-year relationship, married, children, everything, you know, we have to really sit with our options. And this is a very psychological approach in a sense, because we can't just make flippant decisions when so much is at stake. Maybe it's financially at stake. Maybe there's other people involved if there are children or pets or plant babies, you know, but also your emotions and everything that's come into play, everything that's a part of this union. You really have to sit with who you are and what you want and what you need and what you're willing to do, because that decision can only be made by you at that point. And when you're comfortable in that decision, you then might want to see what the beloved wants to do, unless you're in a pretty calm space where you can discuss this quite amicably. That doesn't always happen.
What are some of those key skills, I guess you could call them, or personal attributes or relationship skills that we can develop that do help to co-create this beautiful conscious partnership?
Coming back to that presence and that time and space, really ideally every day there is a moment where you have a connection. And ideally a couple of moments would be nice, but let's say maybe for you it's first thing in the morning before you get out of bed. You might even have a snuggle. You don't bound out of bed when the alarm goes off. You might have a sit down breakfast and talk without phones or newspapers or whatever. It might be a cheeky message during the day, kind of just like thinking of you and I'm not wearing any knickers, if that's your style. Or, you know, I got this for you at the shops because I know you really love it and I saw it. You got to see what works and what pushes your beloved's buttons as well, or what you share together, you know, or I've just seen this has come out. Can we go see this show? You know what I mean? It's like, it's a rendition of what we saw when we first met. If it's nostalgia that brings you together. But sometimes these little things help just kind of connect you in an ocean of like crazy stuff going on. People are pulled here and there in their work life, their family life, their community, to just kind of come together like a wave, and then you go back to what you got to do. Sometimes it is nice because it's like we're kind of filling up a bit of a cup that can get quite empty quite quickly, you know, or a swimming pool. We need that to be full. Ideally, we want to be overflowing. Sometimes it will, sometimes it might not be able to be possible. So creating those little moments are key, but then also you need bigger moments. You might need a day. You might need a weekend. You might need a mini break. You might need a freaking whole vacation, wherever you can go right now under the current climate. We need to invest in that part of the trilogy. That is key, because when we don't, we're back down to a chair with 2 legs or a stool with 2 legs instead of 3. So that's really super important. And it's easy to let slip. I'm just going to say, like, okay, yeah, we got this. It's easy. We'll just, have a little snuggle, and then, just a little something here. And then like Sunday afternoon, it's us time. Before you know it, oh, this happens and I've been invited here and I'm just going to do this. And then, oh, I've got to rush. And then 6 weeks pass and you realize you've hardly paused and connected. Or maybe when you did, one of you wasn't present because they were distracted, or they were stressed, or they were worried. That to me means you're also perhaps not taking care of yourselves individuals enough, having pause times, having disconnect from stimulus times, having strong, firm boundaries, nourishing yourself physically, emotionally, and mentally as well. Because when we're better as individuals, the relationship is better too. And as I said, also, it's going to fluctuate. There's going to be times when this is easier and times when it's more challenging. And that's when we have to come together and support. Maybe one of you has burnout. Maybe one of you, is sick, or one of you just, has to leave and go on a business trip. So things are going to come up that are going to challenge you, because it's never flat. It's going to be like this. But they're the times that you will be challenged to perhaps be more kind, to be more understanding, to have more loving kindness, I'd say is the Buddhist term as opposed to kind. Loving kindness. It's kind of like a selfless giving. You realize I actually need to make their lunch and make their dinner and do their washing and help them pack their suitcase because they've had all this on and they can't do it themselves. And you feel like you're doing all the giving. And in that moment, maybe you are. But if you do it from a genuine place of love for your beloved as an individual, not just like feeling like the maid or the keeper or whatever it is, that can actually be very rewarding for yourself. Because doing something from a place of selfless service brings us joy, where we truly do it from a beautiful place. And essentially it comes back anyway. You don't know what's going to happen, because in 3 weeks down the track, when maybe you're not feeling so great, then your beloved steps up and they're the one making some soup. And they're the one saying, don't worry about this, I've got it, you just rest. We need this give and take. It's energy exchange. It's natural, and it's the universal law. When we aren't in that flow of giving and taking, or of giving and receiving, then we're kind of butting heads a bit, and we're not in flow, and therefore we're not conscious. We're either blocking it intentionally, blocking it because we feel like it's not our place to have to do that, or blocking it subconsciously because perhaps we're ignorant or unaware of a repeat habit that we're in. Maybe it's something we picked up from a previous relationship because this partner never did anything for us. So therefore, when someone gets a cold, you don't want to have to do anything for them. Like, call your mum, call your friend, it's not my place. You could be carrying some old baggage there. And if there's something going on in your relationship, your current relationship, it can actually be an opportunity for you to heal whatever it is that you dragged into this one from that last one. So sometimes these tricky times are also opportunities for us to sort out our stuff, not just to sort out what's perhaps going on in the actual relationship. So that can also be a gift too. A little bit tricky, a little bit hard, makes it a bit more complicated. We might not always see it, but sometimes we might get it and be like, I have this pattern of withholding love when something happens. I have a pattern of, being passive aggressive when something happens. You might start to pick up on some things within yourself, because here's the other beautiful part of having a truly conscious relationship. You're learning how to know thyself, as we call it. The more you know you, the more you can work on breaking these habits, the more also you'll be a mirror to your beloved who might be able to do the same kind of work. The more intimate, conscious, connected, loving, and ideally transcendent your relationship can be as a result of that. So when I say doing the work, yeah, it's kind of big work, but it's very rewarding work. If you're truly wanting a conscious relationship, that means you truly want a conscious way of living. And that means being conscious and awake and alert to your own sometimes shortcomings or habits or addictions or behaviors that perhaps served before, but you don't want to bring them into this relationship. Not if this is the relationship that you want to last the test of time. So that might be a bit of a roundabout answer, but all really valid and important things for us to sit with, I think.
A common complaint that I often hear women talking about, and this is really common to those of us that grew up being the good girl, right? The one that helped out around the house and was used to being really kind and generous and doing things in our family environment in order to, what we perceive, win or earn love. And then we often take that pattern into relationships where we're the one really giving in the relationship. We're really attending to all of our partner's needs and being really loving, right? What tends to happen though, if we've been with someone who we felt didn't reciprocate that or take advantage of that, is we start to build up some resentment about that giving as well. We're still repeating the pattern because we somehow believe that that's how we earn love from someone, but it can create resentment in relationships. So I'm just imagining, as many of the girls are listening to that, this loving unconditionally, right, and really meeting the needs of our partner, how do we go about doing that without potentially that resentment coming up if we don't immediately see them reciprocating that?
Such an amazing question, and so valid, and something that I personally worked on, and definitely something that I address with women and men actually sometimes, because it definitely goes both ways. But normally it is the woman that definitely gives more. So one of my favorite words is boundaries. It doesn't mean that we withhold love. It doesn't mean that we need to be passive aggressive. They could be, as an example, as two examples, part of your default, especially if you are someone who gives and gives and gives and gives until you kind of exhaust yourself, or you get so angry that he could just do the littlest thing and you will snap and he'll be like, what the hell? And it wasn't that was the cherry on top. It was all this other stuff that went unacknowledged, unnoticed, no gratitude, not so much sometimes as even a thank you. So we do have to have boundaries within ourselves. And it's also one of my favorite words that comes into play here is using our discernment. So we have to discern what's right for me as the individual and what's right for the greater good. And sometimes that greater good can be your beloved individual. The greater good can be your relationship. The greater good can be for your community or your family or the world. But just asking yourself, what's right for me here? Like maybe you've done a lot of things lately and they're not really realizing it. So maybe you pull back a little bit, or you just go, hey, my love, tonight, do you want to do this for us? Put it out there. It's kind of like an invitation, but it's also a little hint. It just sometimes is enough. Sometimes it's not enough. And if the little hints aren't enough, then maybe we have to have a conversation, which can be the scariest thing in the world when women say, we need to talk. We don't say it like that. That's why, because then they kind of reproach, or they become defensive, or they're very busy. So how you bring up the idea of, needing to talk is really important. And what's important, or what's key, is picking kind of like the right time, how you say it, and what you say. So if Monday to Friday, it's just not going to happen, then on a Saturday arvo, when you've done the chores and you've had a bit of moment, to yourselves or whatever, you could just bring it up. You could be super chill, going for a walk, and just be like, hey, it's been on my mind. This is how I'm feeling. Have you noticed this? If it's important to you, if our relationship's important to you, do you think we could make some changes here? We're being kind of like calm, kind, but you've got to be firm and assertive. And sometimes you need to give time windows, like by next Thursday, can we please do this? So boundaries, discernment, and a level of assertiveness, which sometimes can be really challenging for pleasers, because we don't want to hurt someone. We don't want to upset their feelings. We don't want them to leave us. But like I said before, with like sitting with what you really want, those options of stay or go, change, don't change. Do you want to be in a relationship with someone who actually doesn't want to acknowledge that there's, room for improvement, who doesn't want to make little changes, who doesn't want to invest in the relationship, maybe by doing some simple tasks, or even validate you and value what you've been doing? So we have to look at it from a couple of different perspectives in that sense. And then also, there's got to be give and take. Maybe someone brings more money to the table and someone does more domestic things. Sometimes it looks like that. Sometimes it can be really even, and then we hire help or whatever it is. So there has to be a balance in whatever setup you have in your union. There has to be balance, with the general day-to-day things, with the running of things, with the living together, let's say. But likewise, there has to be some kind of balance with the intimacy and the connection and the communication. And that's going to look different, because as I said right at the beginning, with those different kind of personality traits, those different aspects of us, people express them differently. because they'll have different personality natures, because they'll have different mental, kind of capacities or ways of seeing things. Some people can be very compartmentalized, very scientific. Other people are quite fluid, and it's like here and there and this and that and experimenting. So if you're kind of one of each of those, you're going to do it differently. So we also have to have the awareness to see when someone's doing it in their way, but doing it for you. It might not be the way you want it to be. Maybe you're someone who wants to have flowers every Friday night, but instead your beloved puts toothpaste on your toothbrush and makes the bed. And you're like, but that's their way of showing, some kind of care, some kind of thought, some kind of help. You can talk about that too and go, hey, I know you do this and it's really kind and thoughtful, but you know what I'd really love? This. Or, when you did this once, that made me feel so amazing. I'd love it if you did that again. So bring the awareness to the table, and then also some positive reinforcement. You're showing gratitude for what they do, even though they're demonstrating it in their way, not quite your way or how you want or need it to be. So this is all about us being open to conversation and being fluid as well. We can't be too rigid or ideal or set in our ways thinking it can only be this way, this is what I want, or this is what I need, or this is how it should be. Should it? Maybe we need to open up a little bit as well ourselves and let someone be who they are as an individual, but learning to also connect with who you are. We have to have that connection, that bridge, right? Otherwise we're islands.
I love the fact that you've just, shared with us some of the components of having a really healthy conversation. And I just wanted to add something to that as well. A lot of the times we leave these conversations until we get to a point where we're actually really frustrated about it, or it's really highly emotionally charged because we've said nothing and said nothing and said nothing and said nothing until the point where it's like, I've got to say something now. And the difficulty with that, what I've noticed is that we often have so many emotions behind it that we don't have the clarity about what is it that I'm actually upset about, what is it that I'd actually like him to do instead, and really having that awareness. It's just like, this is, I can't tolerate this. This isn't fair. So I know you mentioned it's important to choose the right timing for that kind of conversation, getting the right clarity and being in the right emotional state. Do you have any tips about that for that conversation?
For sure. And that's kind of why I said, like, what you say, when you say it, how you say it is so important. Because if, like you just painted that picture so beautifully, Peter, you wait till you're at explosion point, how you say it isn't going to be very nice. And what you say might even be regretful. So yeah, to unpackage that a little bit more, you need to be a bit more self-aware. Back to that know thyself. Know yourself well enough, ideally, when these things are starting to build up a little bit. Because if we wait till the massive build up, we're going to have those explosions that can lead to toxic arguments. And they're pretty hard to come back from. It does happen, of course, but it's really painful or hurtful or frustrating or all those things. Sometimes we pick ourselves up and we kind of start to see things aren't great when you're in the heat of the moment. And maybe this could be the fifth thing that's happened in the last couple of days. Maybe in that moment, you're also still too emotional and not calm of mind and clear of mind enough to address it then. But maybe when you do calm down a bit, you can address it after that. It might be the next day, it might be that night. But if we can reel it back, and maybe you've been there before too many times, you've had toxic arguments, you've been in the chaos, like in the eye of the storm, and you've waited the next day. If we can get it earlier on, soon as you kind of notice things off, actually nip it in the bud then and go, hang on a minute, what's just happening here? It's not okay. And I want you to know that. I love you, whatever. You can be cautious of your language use. You can be cautious of your tone, of your body language, all those things. This takes work, right? To be that aware, that self-aware, and also that self-controlling, not suppressing, controlling, so that we don't project, right? We want to be consciously communicating, consciously expressing, consciously sharing, which means we have to take note of ourselves physically, emotionally, and mentally to go, yeah, I feel clear of mind. I know what I need to say right now. My emotions, I'm not perfect, but I'm calm enough that I'm not going to throw a shoe or a salad bowl through the window, and physically, like, I don't feel riled up. I can stand here quite calmly. I'm not going to get in their face or these kind of things. So if you can have that little self-assessment, be like, no, I'm in a good place. I want to bring this up. And so you go, hey, just so you know, that isn't cool. Or it really actually makes me feel this when you say or do that, or don't do that, as an example. Letting things escalate, letting things build up. We think we're fine, we're fine, we're fine. We just keep going. That will lead to the explosion. That can be toxic. For some people, that can lead to physical, emotional, verbal, mental, all different forms of toxic kind of outlay. And that goes into like your relationship, goes into your home. It can affect those around you, whether that is your pet or it is your child. You can even take it to work or wherever you're going next. So there's a ripple effect when you let things build up. So as a pleaser, sometimes it helps us also go, hang on a minute, if I don't let it get to that point, it's not also going to impact other people. Because sometimes it does. Sometimes we have like the dirty laundry that's aired and it kind of ripples out. Sometimes we can just keep it in the union. That in itself isn't healthy. But if we can be motivated and kind of inspired, I suppose, to think of this rippling out and bringing toxic energy, consciousness, experience into our whole kind of world, it might make us want to change our behavior, because we want to have a positive impact on ourselves, on our beloved, in our environment, with our community, and so on and so forth.
Many women that I work with also experience the anxious attachment and can sometimes second guess, is this my insecurities just coming in, or am I not sort of communicating a strong enough boundary, or am I not communicating my needs well enough, or is this just, essentially we start to kind of second guess whether we should have those conversations or whether it's our own stuff. Am I being too needy, or am I not communicating my needs enough? Do you have any advice for how we actually discern when we're experiencing that confusion? Something doesn't quite feel right in the relationship, but is this my old stuff coming up?
It's a really good question, and so valid, because I know many women who get caught in that loop for years, in fact, as you're probably aware of too, Peter. The thing is, you have to give yourself a little bit of time and space to actually sit with that and ask yourself some of those questions like, do I always do this? And then you're like, yeah, I did that with the last two guys as well when this happened again. But was it valid? And you're like, yeah, actually, because they were both doing the same thing. And now I know that I have an awareness to that. So it's not my neediness. That's like me being like on perceptive alert going, something's not right here. So let's see what we should do about this. Should I have a chat with him, or, is this the 10th time it's happened? I'm just done. I'm going to tell him it's over. That self-awareness, that introspective connection, that moment, if you need to meditate on it, journal about it, speak to a friend, you need to pause and check in and just see if this is your pattern that has no longer, I guess, any need to be in your life. It's one of those things you've outgrown, it served its purpose. Or is it a pattern you have in the sense of a positive thing, that this is something that you're quite attuned to, that you somehow seem to attract these kind of men or these kind of relationships, or this keeps happening because you keep repeating the same thing. So look at it as an opportunity to better know yourself, and also sit with and make sure that you have a better understanding of what's going on. You might then need to also address it and just go, hey, I haven't heard from you all day. Is everything all right? Is there something you need to tell me? If it's nothing, that's totally fine. We can chat tonight. Put it out there, ask. Sometimes we're also too afraid to bring it to the table because we are afraid of abandonment, or we're afraid of upsetting them, or all these kind of things, or making them think that we're needy. But if in that moment you genuinely need to know what's going on because something doesn't seem right, then you're completely in the right for at least asking. It's up to them how they respond. We can't control how anyone responds or reacts. Ideally, it's a response you get if they're evolved enough. But absolutely, if you sit with it and you're like, something's not right, I need to ask, then ask. Choosing the right time, how you say it, what you say it, sure. But don't be afraid to put something out there. Whether it's neediness or not, in that very moment, perhaps it actually is a genuine need. You have to also validate what it is that you need from a relationship or this person too, and not deny those kind of things. And at the same time, balance that with having some self-awareness of, actually, you know what, I'm just being really demanding and I am asking for too much. He called me like 30 minutes ago. He said he'd call, back in an hour. I'm just going to wait the extra 30 minutes. We have to be realistic here. We have to understand we're dealing with another human, another soul, another mind, another set of emotions, another body, another personality who does things differently. So the better we know ourselves, the better we know them, the more we're going to know kind of what's going on. And you'll smell it pretty quick. You'll sniff it out pretty quick.
As conscious spiritual women, we do often feel like in our relationships that we are the ones that are doing most of that work, right? Do you have any final tips or thoughts about how we can engage our partner into wanting to work on having more of a conscious partnership?
You need to hold each other accountable. And the reality is, even before that, there has to be two willing parties. Because if you're the one coming to the table, asking for these things, trying to do these things, encouraging, inviting new things, and they never do, is that right? Once again, sit with that. How's it going to be in 6 months or 6 years? Maybe it's not happening. Do we need to have a conversation? Have we already had 10 conversations about this? You've got to find and feel your way and look at the logic of the landscape as well as the emotional component of the landscape. But really, it takes two people above all else. And sometimes it's going to be easy, sometimes it's not. Sometimes you're going to feel like you're doing more work. Sometimes all of a sudden, out of the blue, they might do something amazing and then they don't do it again for a while. You've got to ask yourself, is that enough for you? Because maybe that component's lacking a little bit, but there's other areas where they're amazing. And you've never had a partner who does things like that or brings that or teaches you with this or supports you with that. Not every relationship has everything you want. We have to accept that some things are going to need work most often, and some things could be amazing, and some things could be lacking. So if that's kind of what you've got in this relationship, how does that look for you? How does that feel for you? Is that something that you want to keep with, invest in, explore, journey together still, knowing that this person doesn't have a strength here, but they've got strength there, and you've never had that before, and you've wanted that for so long, but it came at a cost. Not everyone has everything. We're not all enlightened, awakened souls having a human experience. Most of us are somewhere on the journey, and your beloved could be 1,000 steps ahead of you or 5 steps behind you, and you got to see how you can make that work. Often if there's a massive discrepancy, that's tricky. But if we oscillate a little bit, or someone's here and the other aspires, and you can kind of lift that person up and they want to do the work, that can work too. It's what's right for you as the individual, what you're willing to compromise, what you're not willing to compromise, what both of you together are willing to work on, what your partner's willing to kind of invest for you because they love you, and for the relationship because they value the relationship. You need someone who's going to value you, who wants to put the effort in, who actually, as we said before, makes time and space and meets you on that wavelength that you most long to be met. For some women, a non-negotiable is having an intellectual conversation. And if there's not as much emotion, they know they're loved, but perhaps they don't feel it the same way they want to, but they have this and they've wanted that for so long, then it will work. Maybe sometimes the emotions can come about. Maybe there'll be like little moments, but it's not going to be perhaps everything. But if it is enough and there is room to grow and both of you are willing to do that growth and journey together, then that to me is a relationship worth investing in, but only if it's right for you.
I think we can all agree that the sacred partnership is definitely worth investing in and worth acquiring the kinds of tools and skills in order to be able to have the best possible relationship we can. Unfortunately, there's not really a lot out there in terms of teaching and support and guidance in terms of being able to do that. That's why I'm excited for you to share us a little bit about what you have developed in terms of helping us to be able to create this beautiful conscious partnership.
Absolutely. And I have to kind of thank my partner actually, because he was like, you need to create something that puts all your tools and wisdom together. So first of all, I created a free couples masterclass, which is going to help you explore some of the communication things and to end those toxic relationships. Another component that I address in the free couples masterclass is about creating intimacy. Intimacy, yes, in the bedroom, but intimacy beyond that. As I said, we, especially as women, we want intimacy physically, yes, but we want it emotionally and mentally, and we want conscious connection. We want to have that whole immersion. So helping you understand that. And then the last component in the free couples masterclass is kind of like shifting from the, we're fine, like I talked about, the unconscious relationship. Everything's good, it's fine. We got a puppy, we got a house, we're going to get married, or whatever it is, we've been together and we're cruisy. It's a little bit Netflix and chill. It's a bit beige cardigan, as I like to call it. how to kind of take that and go to something that's transcendent. Go to a place where you've never been before, perhaps with anyone else, or even on your own, and to get there together. So they're kind of the three components of like little goodies and gems that I give you in that. I want so much for couples to have a conscious, loving, intimate, transcendent experience of union. I see that as being such a game changer, because when we have that kind of connection, it has a ripple out effect. And I do see that being a ripple out effect to our children, or a ripple out effect to our communities, or to how we serve, or to our families, or whatever. And if we're all having these conscious relationships around the world, we as a humanity are going to become more conscious, more aware, more loving, more kind, more awake, and ideally make a shift that's not just going to serve us as a humanity, us as a collective, but the earth too, and all those generations to come, because we need shift, we need change. And I know you wouldn't be here right now if you weren't hungry for that too, in every way. But it does start with us, and it does start in our union, that triangle we've been talking about. So yeah.
It feels so beautiful to talk about what kind of impact we can all have when we collectively raise our consciousness around love and relationships. Thank you so much for joining us today, Elise. It's been always a pleasure, and I'm super excited to see the ripple effect that your new course is going to create in this world. Is there any final thoughts that you'd like to share with our audience before we finish up?
Be gentle and kind and loving with yourself, because as I said, this isn't a quick, easy fix. It's a journey. The relationship with yourself is a journey. Things don't change overnight necessarily. The relationship with your beloved is a journey. But if we are consistent, if we are compassionate, if we are open-minded, a little bit less rigid, a little bit more kind of relaxed and open to opportunity, shift will happen. Just make sure that you're honoring your truth, using your discernment, those boundaries. And sometimes, yes, a little bit of that assertive nature needs to come into play, as long as you're doing it with loving kindness, the words you use, the time you say it, how you say it, all that kind of jazz.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. Sending you all so much love, and we'll see you again for tomorrow's Love Transformation class. Bye for now.